Hello, global gardeners. The holidays are approaching. A new year is coming. This will actually be the last live stream of 2023. And I thought it appropriate today to talk about getting your gardening season started. And what does that even mean? And is it something that we actually look at the calendar to decide, or is it more just a frame of mind, something that we think about as we change the gardening habits that we have throughout the course of the year? So I'll be talking about that through the rest of today. Look forward to seeing your questions. And so let's talk gardening for the next hour and a half. A shout out to Sunset Gazing, who gifted 5 memberships to the Gardener Scott channel. So thank you so much for that in this holiday time of giving. That's fantastic that you did that to the 5 people. And I saw that the list of the 5 that you gave to. That's fantastic that you chose those gardeners to be part of our community. So nice to see everybody checking in from Canada and the US and all over the world. It's actually still cold here in Colorado, but the sun is out. Snow is melting. Had about 6 inches of snow over the weekend. And so it's just that time of year to enjoy the cold. And I think to start thinking about the warm days ahead. And for many of us, those warm days equate to gardening activity and what we're going to be doing outside. So, as we begin, first part of the question about starting your season and when it's going to begin, I think for many of us, it is a calendar date. It's easy to say, I'm going to wait until the new year to start planting my garden, or I'm going to wait until the new year to get my seeds. And so once January 1st hits in the new year, then you can jump into gardening with all of your energy. And you've told yourself mentally that your season has started with the planning and the seeds and whatever activities that you equate to the beginning of your gardening season. For me, I tend to think of gardening as a year-round activity. And so it isn't just a single garden season, the summer growing season. For me, it's a whole bunch of seasons. It's a spring growing season, a summer growing season, and a fall growing season. And this year in my greenhouse, I've actually got a winter growing season. And then interspersed between all of those calendar seasons that we might be looking at as far as the spring, summer, fall, and winter are the activities that we do. And so I like to look at my planning for next year's garden as another season in the gardening year, because planning for me takes a period of months, just like it is when we're growing our plants. They'll take a series of months until we get to harvest. Well, planning takes time as well. And then the seeds starting that I'll do in late winter and early spring, that's a whole season of its own, because I'm indoors and I'm growing under lights, but I'm still doing all the normal gardening activities, the watering, the sowing, the harvesting in some cases, the soil preparation. And so as we proceed, I'm interested to see your questions and also your comments on how you perceive your gardening season. Is it a sequence of different seasons, or is it just a frame of mind that helps highlight what the most important activities are for you in your gardening day? And so Lisa is saying indoor and outdoor growing season. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to look at it for those of you that do the indoor gardening, and separating it into those 2 distinct activities. Absolutely. 2 gals is saying, I'm working on my calendar, seeds, business plan, and everything. The greenhouse brings another dimension. Already have green and herbs going strong. Awesome. And so the calendar is a good aspect as you bring that up, Gail, that uh, we can write our own calendar, literally, when it comes to the gardening season. As I've shown in previous videos, I'll take the calendars that I get that are printed with the dates from January to December, and I'll fill in different activities on that calendar. But you can also create your own separate calendar that is really just what's happening in the garden. And that calendar can begin at any time of year. So, for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere that right now you're about to approach summer, well, use your own calendar. It doesn't necessarily need to match up to whether it's June or July or August, or whether it's December, January, or February. You can have a nameless calendar. As far as month one in your garden, you're going to take care of the soil preparation and the sowing and the weeding. And then in month two, you're going to take care of thinning out and pest control and maybe some fertilization. And in month three, you're going to take on other gardening tasks. And so if you approach gardening from that perspective, where the month really doesn't have a name, and we're really not going from June 1st to June 30th. Instead, we're going from garden day 1 to garden day 100. You might see that you can focus on your plants a little bit better. So many of the things we grow have a date line to them. You look at your package of seeds, it'll say harvest in 100 days or days to maturity 90. And I've had this problem where sometimes when you have a plant growing and you're expecting to harvest that plant in 90 days, when you look at the traditional calendar, it's hard to figure out just exactly what date that's going to be that you need to look at your harvest. So if you start your own calendar beginning on day 1, when you're looking for the 90-day point, it doesn't matter what the calendar date is. You're now operating under day 90 in your garden. And so, have you ever thought about that as a way to approach your gardening season from day 1 to day 120, however long your season is? And don't worry so much about what the date is. Instead, look at your garden tasks and put them on your numbered calendar that has no month names to it. So, just want to kind of put that in your mind as maybe a different way to think about how you do some of your gardening, and see if maybe that might make a difference. Because I've had so many plants, and I'm sure many of you as well, that I miss that harvest point. I'm either too early or too late, because sometimes I rely too much on the idea that it's August 24th and I should have tomatoes. When if I were to look back at how many days those tomato plants have been in the ground, I can stop and say, oh, the reason I don't have tomatoes on August 24th is because I planted late and these plants have only been in the ground for 5 weeks. And so they're not ready to harvest yet. And so you kind of take away some of those constraints that the calendar might actually throw our way. So Root Trackers says, "Great rising. Thank you to the person who gifted me a membership." Well, you're very welcome on my behalf. And as we had said earlier, it was Sunset Gazing that had gifted some memberships today. So another shout out to Sunset Gazing. Dennis is saying, "I have lettuce and radishes sprouting in my green stock." Awesome. Still have different lettuces growing in my raised bed, and I'm getting enough for salads every night for my wife and I. That is fantastic. I love my green stock for that exact reason, that you can grow the salad crops and then just go out your back door and have a salad for dinner, and it's easy to harvest. So it's especially this time of year. I was just looking yesterday. Greenstock still has some holiday sales going on. I think one of the ones they have this week is $50 or more that you order includes free shipping. Now, I think we have passed the point to get anything before Christmas, those kind of things that are shipped. But this is still a great time of year to be ordering things taking advantage of the Christmas and holiday sales, and then have them delivered after the holidays because you're buying them for yourself anyway. So uh, I always put green stock into that category because they're one of the things so many of us are using and so many of us want to be using more and more. Connie Davison, hello to you. I've got sweet potato slips growing in my kitchen along with my overwintered pepper and eggplants. Also have brassicas and lettuce outside. So this is awesome. So between the two of you that actually have plants that are growing, this ties into one of the points that I'm talking about today, that you're growing plants in December, and so it really doesn't matter that you're in one garden season or another garden season. The plants can grow, you're growing those plants, and you're enjoying the enjoyment of those plants. And too often, especially new gardeners, think in terms of the calendar. I can't put my seeds in until April or May, and I can't put my tomatoes and peppers until May or June. And you really limit what you're doing in your gardening world when you rely on the calendar. And so when you can grow tomato slips on your counter or lettuces out in your green stock in December, I say go for it and don't be constrained by the calendar and what we tend to think of as a garden season based on what the seed packages say or what some advisor tells us we should be doing. Grow what you want to grow whenever you want to grow it. And that's gardening. Regardless of the outdoor season, you're enjoying the planting. And so I've got I've got the plants in my greenhouse still very, very small because there's not much sunlight to keep them growing at a faster level. I've got some things growing inside my house down right now. And so that's why I say for me, gardening is a year-round activity. I always have something growing. It might not be a lot, but I always have something that I'm tending to kind of scratch that gardening itch that so many of us have. Yankee Sista Homestead, hello to you. I'm growing peppers, basil in my aereo garden. Plus, I still have brassicas growing outside under hoops. That's fantastic. Yeah, there's many areas. I know the East Coast is starting to get slammed by some bad weather this week, but many areas like southern New England and Connecticut, that weather hasn't gotten so cold that it has killed brassicas. Brassicas are one of those crops that are so hardy that many people can keep them growing for much of the year. And so back to the idea of a growing season. How do you define a growing season? For some of us, it's been so cold the brassicas died weeks ago here in Colorado. But for you who are still growing the brassicas, your summer or fall garden is still going, even though winter is just a couple days away. So good for you. I think that's fantastic. And Llama Llama says, I view it as a year round, and the season just tells me what I'm doing. I like that idea. Late fall and winter when I'm drawing my plan out, spring starting seeds and growing frost hardy, and then summer and fall growing the harvest the most. So exactly. That's exactly my point. You are on the same track as I am because we just are changing our activities based on what's happening with the weather outside or based on how much time we have available. But the gardening season is the year 2023 or the 2023 to 2024 season, however you choose to define it in that way. But don't feel like you have to stop growing just because of a date of a calendar. And that's kind of the ultimate message of today is especially those of you who are actively growing your gardens in those warm regions. Don't think you have to stop just because you reach a certain date. Figure out what you can do to keep the growing going. And I should put that on a t-shirt, keep the growing going, because that's what gardening is all about for me in particular, because it is so much fun. Boothby Garden says, my Swiss chard is growing better inside than it ever did outside. Interesting perspective. And that's another great way to look at it. Whether it's indoor or outdoor growing that you're doing, if if a traditionally outside crop does better indoors, grow it indoors. And you've got an indoor growing season to match your outdoor growing season. That's a fantastic way to look at that. Okay, I'm scrolling down. I see Tony is signing in. Nice to see you, Tony O'Neill from the Simplified Gardening channel. I was on his live stream last week, and so that was a fun time talking about some winter gardening in particular. So nice to have you here, Tony, and so nice of all the rest of you saying hello to Tony as well. Simone is saying, I have a 3-year-old pepper outside. Last one fruit ripening. Hope we'll harvest it soon. Yeah, that last fruit, especially on peppers, as the weather starts getting cold, it's waiting and waiting for that last one. So I hope you can harvest it soon as well. But that's fantastic. And pepper plants are ideal if you can overwinter them if you're in a cold area, or if you live in a warm area where you don't have to worry about those severe cold temperatures. They'll grow for years. So yeah, 3-year-old pepper plant, good for you. That's fantastic. And I'm guessing it's just getting bigger and stronger, and every year the harvest will be even better. So that's definitely a way to do it. Jay is saying, Serena Norrell wrote, I'm participating in games with my Facebook garden group, Seed Voyagers and Garden Warriors. Interesting. I don't know Seed Voyagers and Garden Warriors. So I'll have to look into that. I'm always looking for interesting games to add to our library of things that we like to do. So that's interesting. Sherry saying, hey, friends, thought I was going to miss today's get together, but my dog had an issue that precludes my leaving him home to take the car in for a recall repair. So glad you're here, Sherry, and hope the dog and the car are both well as you proceed to get those taken care of. Llama saying, I haven't yet successfully grown decent sized bulbing onions, and I'm pretty sure it's my timing. Do you think it'd be worth trying to just direct sow and let nature take its course? Absolutely. In fact, I started doing some filming to do a video next year. And so this year I did the video on how to harvest onion seeds, because it takes 2 seasons to be able to do those onion seeds. So after I harvested those seeds, what I did was direct sow them. So I sowed them way back in September, I think it was. And the intent is to do exactly that, to let nature take its course. And so if everything goes as planned, I'll actually have that video next year that says that's a good way to grow onions, is to put them in the ground whenever, and they'll sprout whenever the soil temperature is right, and the moisture and the sun is right, and the heat in the soil is right, and then they'll start growing. And as long as it's the right kind of onion for your latitude, then you're, I think, more likely to get bulbing, because the onion is growing at its own pace. The traditional way that we grow the onions is to either start them from seed indoors and then put out the young plants, and so that adds some stress to the plants. Or we go to the nursery and buy the starts, the little bulbs that we put into the ground. Well, the reason they're little bulbs is because they were actually grown the year before from seed, and then they were pulled and allowed to go dormant. And so you're planting almost a 1-year-old onion if you do it that way. But if you just put the seeds outside and let them grow naturally, you'll get some really good growth, and you might see that you're getting some good onions. At the Galileo School, I did that a couple years, and the best onions I had were the ones that were from the seeds sown from the previous year's collection of seeds, and then just letting nature take its course. So I say go for it. Go ahead and put some of those onion seeds out and see what happens, and see how your results are. Then the key point, and I've got a video about starting onions from seed as well, is making sure that you choose the right variety to match how much daylight you're getting. Whether you get a short day variety, intermediate day, or long day variety, that can make a big difference in how well they bulb as well. So good luck with that. You'll have to let us know if you try it and if it works out next year after you harvest your onions, which hopefully will give you some nice big bulbs. Douglas Allman, hello to you. Is more people growing in raised beds than traditional till gardening? I think so, yes. And so I think there's many reasons for this. There are still a lot of traditional gardeners, and whether you till or not, I break it into two basic categories: in-ground gardening and raised bed gardening. And so the in-ground gardening is the traditional way we do it, where you take your tiller, you break apart the soil, you add your amendments, you plant typically in long rows, you've got paths between the rows, and that's how many of us learn to garden. That's the way our parents might have gardened, our grandparents might have gardened, and it's really only been since the 1970s that raised bed gardening even became a thing. Before then, there really wasn't much information about raised bed gardening. Everybody just did in ground gardening. And so there are many reasons, and I've got many videos that talk about the good and the bad of raised bed gardens. There are many reasons why it makes sense. So for me, here in Colorado, with terrible, terrible soil, one of the big reasons to do raised bed gardening is that I can have a good soil in that bed. And that is a major draw for a lot of gardeners. I also like my wooden raised beds because I can sit on the beds. I can rest my back, and it makes some of those basic garden tasks easier. And now, particularly with the metal raised beds, the modular systems that come in pieces that you can screw together in all different sizes and different heights, it allows gardeners to really design a garden space that's ideal for them and easy, because you can have those beds shipped to you and they'll last virtually forever. So, tilling and clearing the ground and creating an in ground patch really can be a lot of work. And once you've got your raised bed in place, I think it tends to be a little bit easier to do your gardening. So when you put all that together and then you throw in the fact that I'm making videos about raised bed gardening, and Epic Gardening is making videos about raised beds, and Self Sufficient Me is making videos about raised beds. And so all of the bigger channels in the YouTube gardening universe are growing in raised beds. And so new gardeners look for how they're going to garden, and that's what they see on YouTube is raised bed gardening. So I don't know of a study that has determined what the numbers are, but I can tell you that every gardener I know, and I know a lot of gardeners, every gardener I know and every garden I've visited in the last 10 years, they're using raised beds in a good portion of their garden. In some cases, exclusively, that's all they're growing in is raised beds. So, nothing against in ground gardening or container gardening. I think container gardening is a great option as well. But when you look at just how many people you probably know that are gardening, start counting how many of them are using raised beds. And I'll bet you more are using raised beds than are using the in ground beds. That's basically what I've been seeing. And Barbara's making a good point. I'm a renter. Landlord allowed me to plant a garden with very limited space and extremely rocky soil. Would containers help make the most of my growing space? And so, containers and raised beds, depending on how much space it is. This is one of the reasons I think raised beds are becoming so popular, because, especially for renters, you can get one of those modular steel raised beds, put it wherever you want. You can put it on a patio, you can put it on an area that's really rocky, and you can have a full size 4 foot wide, 8 foot long bed. And then when you move, you just unscrew it and take it with you. You can even bag up the soil and take that with you as well. So if you're looking for a bigger size garden, consider a raised bed, even as a renter. But if you don't want to take that approach, absolutely. Containers can allow you to grow just about anything you want to grow. I've got the videos where I show growing in the grow bags, where I grow potatoes in grow bags. I grow tomatoes in grow bags. This year I grew tomatoes and potatoes in 5-gallon buckets. I've got many, many herbs that are growing in containers. And so I've mentioned it periodically. I know a gardener who grows in nothing but 5-gallon buckets. He probably has 50 buckets on his driveway. And every year, that's his garden. And he's grown squash and corn and melons. And of course, the peppers and the tomatoes and the potatoes all in 5-gallon buckets. So the sky's the limit. And it might be easier as a renter to move your garden to your next location in a container than a raised bed. But the idea is put in something that is relatively portable, and you can have whatever kind of garden that you want. And so the containers make for a really good option, especially with the rocky soil and the fact that you're only a renter. But I say go for it. I say have a garden, have as many containers as you can, and grow everything you can possibly grow as well. And so I saw that we also have in the garden with Eli and Kate that have joined us today. So it's nice that you're with us. The recent videos that Eli and Kate have been doing on their channel, In the Garden with Eli and Kate, I'd highly recommend. They've been cleaning up their garden. They've been getting ready for the new season. And this gets back to the theme of today: is how do you define what a garden season is, and what is the end and what is the beginning? And so watch some of the Eli and Kate's video, because even while they're ending one season by cleaning out the greenhouse or by cleaning all their containers, they're also starting another season by redoing a raised bed and starting to think about how they're going to put in an arbor or a trellis. And at the same time, cleaning up the plants that are still growing but need to be cleaned up. For the rest of us, the plants are not growing at all. So it's all relative as to what the end of one season is and what the beginning of another season will be. And sometimes that line is blurred because of all the different activities you're doing. And so while I'm looking at my snow-covered garden, I'm enjoying Eli and Kate's activities as they're actively working in their garden amidst the cold and the rain that they're having in Scotland. They're still getting outside and getting some work done. So I think that's always fun. So it's nice everyone is saying hello, and yeah, sometimes it's hard to keep up with everybody, but we know you're here. You can slow down your typing and not have to worry too much about it. So colorblind gardener, hello. I'm trying out hydroponics while it's too cold to go outside. How has your hydroponics been going? So there you go. And that's a whole separate season. And again, the idea that you can garden year round, hydroponics is a good option. And so I'm not actually growing anything right now. I drained my system because I was using the mix of the cocoa core and the perlite. And then I had some peppers growing, and I had some tomatoes growing, and I had some spinach growing, and I had some lettuce growing, and had some basil growing. And as those plants were growing, and then I would remove a plant, put in some new seeds, the level of the soil in my blocks began to drop. So I now need to add more soil and start all over again. So it worked well. The biggest issue I had with my hydroponics was that I was trying to grow a lot of different plants at the same time. And it was an experiment. And my hypothesis was that it wouldn't work out well. And in many ways, it didn't. And it's all about the nutrients you're using. And so as I was researching and came across a recipe, and I talk about this in one of my hydroponics videos, it was pretty high in nitrogen. And I knew that, but having not done hydroponics before, I wasn't really sure how it would affect the tomatoes and peppers in particular. And so what I found was those plants grew great, but just like in an outdoor setting, if your soil has too much nitrogen in it, you're going to get big green plants and you're not going to get the flowers and the fruit that you want on those plants. So, indoors in my basement, my tomato plants were 10 feet tall. I had to tie them and direct their growth. And I really didn't get many tomatoes, just a handful of tomatoes on these huge plants. And it's because the nitrogen level of the nutrients was just too high. The same thing with the peppers, big, beautiful, bushy pepper plants. I was able to harvest more of the peppers than I harvested of the tomatoes, but again, it was too much nitrogen. So then I started cutting back on the nitrogen to try to get those plants to grow. And my lettuces and the spinach didn't do as well because they didn't have enough nitrogen. And so the big lesson I had with my hydroponics for me was you really need to be careful about mixing plants that have different nutrient needs. And so it proved my hypothesis that myth, mismatching the plants to the nutrient levels can be a problem. So once I had some soil and am ready to get started again with my hydroponic season, I'll actually be doing more of that. And so I'm busy right now with all the holiday activities, but I'm planning the beginning of the year to start doing just the leafy greens and see how that grows when I my my focus is on those plants that really like the nitrogen. So go for it, try it out, and based on everything I just said, I would suggest choosing the plants to match the nutrients that you're going to do, and you'll probably see better results. So, in the Garden with Eli and Kate says, I'm with you guys over the excitement with growing onions. We'll be making our traditional French onion soup on Christmas Eve using the last of our homegrown onions. Very excited. Oh, that's fantastic. I I love French onion soup, but I've never made French onion soup from my own onions. So what a great tradition to have the onions that you grow and then eat them on Christmas Eve. That's actually fantastic. Brian saying, I'm going to try a hydroponic system using worm castings and comfrey tea. I've thought of doing that in my greenhouse. Probably not this year, but the next year, once I figure out all of my lighting and heating, and if I add solar and things like that. Um, yeah, that's a nice approach, Brian. The thing about worm castings, which tend to be high in nitrogen, and comfrey tea, which tends to be high in about 15 different nutrients, is it's hard to determine just exactly how nutrient rich that mix is. And so it'll take some experimentation. And I look forward to hearing the results as to how often you need to use the comfrey tea and the worm castings and whatever else you're using to get the nutrients to the plants, because the nutrients are there, but trying to make sure that it's enough for the plant's needs is really the hardest part of hydroponics. And especially if you're going more of the natural route, like with the worm castings and the comfrey tea, uh, it will take some time. So make sure you take lots of notes and really try to do the analysis of how well the plants are growing based on what you add to it, and then share that with us at the end of that season, whenever that happens to be, so that we can pass on the information. I love those kind of experiments and seeing what'll work and what won't work. It's really a fantastic way to do it. Jeanette saying, taking this down time to have my soil nutrient test. Awesome. Ordered kits from the RX Soil. Yeah, I was just talking about RX Soil. So thank you for doing that, because I think that's something that we all should be doing on a regular basis is testing our soil, and especially during the downtime, get out there and dig up some of your soil and send it in and see how your next season begins. So again, it's a flowing calendar as we look at when our growing season is beginning and ending. And so in the downtime, testing your soil If everything's good, then you can start your seeds and your plants without anything. But if you do a soil test in winter and find out that you've got some deficiencies, you still have time in late winter and early spring to amend your soil or to prepare for whatever fertilizers you're going to use before the plants get in the ground. So I love that idea. I love that idea of checking the soil on a regular basis. And thank you, Jay, for posting the link to the 4 hydroponic videos that I have. And I'm planning. I don't have anything scheduled right now, but I am planning more videos on the hydroponics to show exactly what I talked about. That now that I'm growing nothing but lettuce, here's how wonderful the lettuce is and harvesting it. And I was actually uh, sowing the seeds, the lettuce seeds, in the growing medium and starting from zero in my hydroponic system. I wasn't starting the seeds separately and then transplanting into the hydroponics. I did everything directly in the hydroponics, and it actually worked out very well. So, if you're looking for something new this year, hydroponics might be one of those things to get you going in that direction. Uh, okay, I'm scrolling down. Looks like Serena might have asked a question that I missed. I see people commenting about me missing the question, and I didn't see the question. So always feel free to ask it again. And hopefully I'll catch up when the time comes. And Jay has a good point. If you put at Gardner Scott at the beginning of the comment, like I mentioned in the description below, I'm much more likely to see it because those of you that are on chat can see how much chat's going on and how many comments are going. And when I'm looking at the calendar, or not the calendar, the camera, I don't always see something that may have passed me by. So I do try to keep it as current as possible as we look at the questions. Betty saying, I was happy to see seed catalogs in my mailbox after not checking it for almost a month, missing my garden and home while I'm forced to stay at an Airbnb. So a few catalogs help. Yeah, that is such a wonderful thing. I agree. Sometimes I won't check the mail every day, and it's the same thing. If I go and I see 2 or 3 catalogs in the mailbox, I kind of kick myself for not having checked it the day before, because every time I see a catalog, it's like a special present that comes in the mail. So fully know what that happiness is, Betty, and I'm glad you can enjoy it and hopefully get back to your garden and as soon as you can, if as the weather gets better, I'm assuming. Skippy is saying, I have good luck with lettuce and spinach hydroponically. Good to hear that. Yeah, that's why I say that's my plan, to focus on those plants in particular. And when you look at most of the commercial hydroponic farms, that seems to be what they're growing in huge numbers, are the lettuces and the spinach and the similar leafy vegetables, because it's almost ideally suited for hydroponic growing. I mean, I really wanted to have my tomatoes to be a success so that I could grow tomatoes year round, but I know tomatoes can be grown hydroponically. I just think in a home situation, sometimes it's a little too much work for those of us that like to have it easy in our garden. So keep that in mind as you think about your hydroponics. Humorous, hello. People will actually pay for you to farm kelp, a lot of money. So if you all want to worship money, why don't you fix the planet while we're worshiping money? I have a family, very good friends. In fact, I just visited them this weekend that live not too far from me, and their daughter actually worked on a kelp farm in South America this last year. So, yeah, that's, when we talk farming, it doesn't have to be in a raised bed or in a container or in the ground. There are other options out there, and kelp farming is one of those. And there are many kelp farms in the world that are looking for workers. And so I was just so impressed and so amazed that she went down and worked for a couple months, helping out the farming of the kelp off the coast of South America. So it's such an interesting idea to have that growing happening even when it's in the water. So it's when we define our gardens and how we garden in our garden season, there's no single answer. And so I've said this so many times. All of our gardens are unique, and all of us as gardeners are unique. And so take advantage of what you want to do and what works best for you and enjoy it, as I always say. Sherry's saying, I'm going to try hydroponics this winter, and the research I've done so far says the same thing. Leafy greens grow good together and flowering plants together. Yep, absolutely. So take that away for all of you who are thinking hydroponics. Uh, I unless you want to experiment like me. I mean, I did it as an experiment, and it gave me some very good results. And that's why I won't be mixing them again in the future if I want a good harvest. And that's what you're going to see if you watch a video on how to hydroponic. You're not going to see the video of mine that shows all the different things. You're going to see the guys that know what they're doing and doing everything together at the same time. The Wickershire project off grid saying Northerners get the high nitrogen snow covered soils in H2. It's a weird cold insulation to protect roots and bulbs. Yeah, I've got that going on right now with the snow that I've got on the or covering the soil. It's a weird thing though, because nitrogen in soil moves pretty quickly through the soil, so it leaches out pretty quickly. So even though we might get um, some rain and snow from in the northern locations that might be a little higher in nitrogen, it also leaches out when all that snow melts. And so another great reason to have organic matter in your soil to hold on to some of those nutrients that might be in the snow when it melts and it doesn't leach out of your soil, particularly in raised beds. Easy way to have the organic matter that's in the soil and mulch on top of the soil, and anything that comes from the air, the ozone that also gets trapped in the snow, then melts and is now in the soil. If you don't have something to hold it in your soil, it's going to be gone. So uh, never can say it enough to amend your soil with organic matter, and it's going to really definitely improve the way that you're gardening. So see a lot of people. I've been looking for Serena's question, and I've seen some people comment to Serena that they can't find the question. And so uh, if someone sees what the question is, yeah, Wally's saying it looks like it's not posting. So I'm not sure if someone can uh, try to figure out what's going on. I don't have an answer to it, but we've seen some of your questions before, Serena, so I'm not sure what's happening today, but we'll keep looking, and hopefully with the help of others, we'll get your question answered. Maybe it's just one of those things that for some reason right now the system isn't in sync. Yeah, Jay's saying scrolled the length 3 times and can't find it. So weird. So weird. You know, uh, the whole software and online and internet and linking, it's just magic for so many of us, and we can figure out how to use it, but we can't necessarily understand what's happening when it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. So Gail is saying, have you grown microgreens? We're thinking of starting a small community microgreen biz. So I've done microgreens in just a very, very small scale, and I have some seeds right now to actually do some microgreens and make a video about it in the next couple months. And so it's not something that I am actively doing on a regular basis, and I haven't done a lot of it. But there's some great videos out there, and there's some great information you can find about turning it into a small business. So uh, I wish I could give you some information to help you along those lines, but I know there's lots of good information out there that you'll be able to find. And I wish you the best. That can be a lot of fun, and especially if you're choosing the right kind of grains, you can get a few harvests. So you'll sow the seeds, they'll grow. You harvest the greens, but don't pull out the plants, and then they re-sprout, and you harvest again. And so, especially some of those leafy kind of microgreens, you can get multiple harvests from the same tray. And I think that's really an awesome approach, especially when you're doing it from the business perspective. Patrick Kelly, hello to you. Had to move from a place I was in. Got told I had to remove all the mulch of the garden beds by a real estate person. So much work. And I'm sorry that to hear you had to remove the mulch, because whatever's not there or whatever's there now, I would imagine is worse than whatever mulch that you had in place. But um, that's sometimes you have to listen to the real estate people if you want to sell the house and move on. But that's I wish there was more in the real estate industry where they recognize the importance of gardens, and there are a lot of gardeners out there looking for a house that already has gardens in place to include the mulch. But I think that kind of runs counter to the assumptions that a lot of realtors make. So yeah, way too much work if you have to redo it all. uh, so uh, Renee says, does the question have a link in it? That won't post. And so that's possible. It's not always the case. Like Jay often puts a question in that has a link. So it all depends on what's happening. But and there's Serena saying, I'm using my iPad. And so, see, I saw this comment of yours, Serena. So we're obviously seeing some of your posts, but maybe not all of them. And you're in live chat. So, I mean, we're all trying to help you, Serena. So um, just be aware. And pasting it repeatedly and it's still not working. So maybe try, Serena, since I just seen these 3 comments of yours, why don't you try putting a comment just like you did, however you did this one, and then just add to it. Don't paste, just put this comment like this one, do a new comment, and then keep writing the comment to include whatever your question might be. And maybe that'll make a difference. Celsith. I'm so sorry I have trouble with that each week. I'm waiting on grow mats arriving for microgreens. Can you suggest a way to grow without soil in the meantime? I see people saying jars, but I'm not sure how. And so there are a few ways you can do it. So I think growing in a medium, even if it's just coco coir or perlite or whatever you might have, I think, in just my experience, it tends to work a little bit better because the roots have something to hold on to. If you grow in just water, then the biggest issue, if you've got too much water, once the plants grow and they kind of flop over and then they basically sink because they're just covered by water. And so getting the water level right, particularly in a jar, it's typically a very small amount of water just to get the seeds germinating and to offer some support for those roots. And there's also, I haven't tried it, but you might be able to make a gel like out of cornstarch to also give more support to those little seedlings as they're growing. But you can also grow in a mat or in some fabrics, some loose fabrics. You might actually be able to get some germination and keep that fabric wet. So, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience growing the microgreens, but those are a couple ways that I've seen it done. Hello, Caroline. Hello from Northern Nevada. How do I counteract both alkaline and salt soil living near the salt flats of the Carson Sink? Yeah, that's a terrible area. I think I've mentioned before that I grew up outside of Reno, and so hard to grow in those areas. And this is, like we were talking about earlier in the show, a great reason why you would grow in containers or raised beds. When you've got the basic soil that is just too hard to get plants to grow. Now, you can grow in alkaline and salt soil if you add a lot of organic matter, and over time that salt will leach out and the organic matter and all those microbes in the soil will tend to neutralize the soil a bit so it won't be as alkaline. But that takes a lot of time and a lot of work. If you put a raised bed on top of that terrible soil and then fill the raised bed with a good blend of new and different soil, then you can start gardening right away. And that's the approach I've taken here in Colorado. Very alkaline soil. It's not salty, but there's no nutrients in it to speak of. And so growing in my native soil, at least the vegetable plants that I want to grow, would take a lot of work to get those beds going in ground. So I got raised beds and then filled those beds with good soil. And so that, yes, there's work involved to build the beds and work involved to fill the beds, but it's going to be much easier from that point forward when you've got the beds filled than that constant battle in a salty alkaline environment to try to get plants to grow. So that's the approach I would take. Now, if you don't want to do the raised beds in the containers, sulfur, elemental sulfur is what you need to add to the soil to bring the pH down. And so that counteracts the pH problem. There are some plants that you can grow that can absorb salt and over time will reduce the salinity of the soil. But again, that's a lot of time, and you have to be very selective with those plants that help reduce the salinity of the soil. And you've got a couple years where you're basically not growing anything but those plants. And so if you start with another option, you don't have to take any of that corrective action, and you'll be able to jump right into the growing with hopefully no issues and get everything from seed to harvest in the same season, which is what most of us want to do. And then from there, it's the kind of thing, especially those of us living in challenging soil environments. You struggle for years trying to get things to grow, have some success, and then you do something like a raised bed garden with a single bed and see how much easier it is and how more successful your crop is. And then you add a second bed, and then you add a fourth bed. And that's what I tend to see in this area that I'm in outside of Colorado Springs and the windswept prairies with the harsh weather that we have, is once people start doing raised bed gardening, they do more and more raised bed gardening because it's able to counteract all those problems they have with their soil and even with the weather as well. Overworked Gardener says, very impressive how you can sit there, that snow covered area, not even shiver. So it's all relative. I've had this conversation a couple times in recent weeks where it's been extremely cold here in Colorado. Every night is below freezing. We've had many days that it did not get even up to freezing. And I go outside in, a shirt like I'm wearing today, just a long sleeve flannel shirt, and do whatever I need to do. You get used to it. But this background today, let me go ahead and talk about that. This isn't my garden. This is actually in Vermont, and this comes from Gail Sassine. And we've seen this garden before. Gail has sent me pictures of the garden, and I've included it in the backdrop during the summer months when things are actively growing. But it's I I think beautiful. I love the snow. I love looking at the gardens covered with snow. I like looking at my garden covered with snow. And on Instagram recently, I've posted pictures after the snowstorms as I'm outside in my garden and just enjoying everything about it. And so this is what Vermont looks like, at least Gail's part of Vermont, and what her garden looks like in the middle of winter. And if you look close through the fence, you can see some of those garden elements. You can see some of the hoops over the low beds, and you can see some of the other gardening uh, activities that are happening around the edges. And especially if you remember this as a background or go back to one of the live streams where we have Gail's garden, you can see that it's completely different in the winter time. But one of the reasons I like going out to my garden in the snow is I know it's my garden. There's nothing growing, but all of those wonderful feelings I get from being in my garden, those don't go away just because the plants have gone away. So standing in my garden when it's filled with the ice and the snow and it's a crisp morning, I really enjoy that because I'm still in my garden and still soaking up all of the garden energy. And so I'm hoping that you all can look at this picture. The trees are weighed down with the snow, and imagine walking out to this garden space when there's nothing growing and still being able to enjoy it because it's your garden. It just happens to be underneath snow. So I love this picture, Gail, and thank you so much for sharing it because it reminds me of the time 4 years that I lived in northern Maine, and we had many winters like this with the deep, heavy snow. Back then, I didn't have a garden, but I would do the same thing if I was gardening up there now. I would walk out in the deep snow on a clear blue sky day and just soak in the garden's energy and think about what was going to be in the same beds in just a few months that are actively growing. So, such a wonderful time of year when we can see some of the the framework. I like going out in my garden in winter because there are no plants in the way and you can actually see the structures in your garden and recognize the bare spots and where you need to put a new bed or where you might want to put a tree or where you might want to think about doing container gardening because the space isn't big enough for a tree or a raised bed, but maybe it's big enough for some containers to put in. So get out in your garden in winter and build some of that into your planning and take it full advantage of the year round seasons of gardening to include the the planting season that is usually during the time of year that we can't get and see things growing. So I've seen a couple of people talk about Rushmore tomatoes that Serena's trying to ask about. I don't know about Rushmore tomatoes. So if you're asking about Rushmore tomatoes, I can't tell you anything. I'm guessing it is a tomato based on the name Mount Rushmore, maybe. And so maybe it's a type of tomato that can handle some cooler conditions, probably a shorter season tomato. But I haven't grown Rushmore tomatoes. So I really don't know what it is that you're asking about them. And it looks like a lot of so you're getting there. A lot of people have seen the Rushmore tomato in the comment. Yeah, there you go. Trying to get info on the Rushmore tomato. So you made it through with a question. But I don't know about Rushmore tomatoes. I don't know anything about them. So I would say just do a simple search, find out who is selling the seeds, and probably on that website you'll find some more information about growing Rushmore tomatoes and see if it matches what you're looking for in a tomato. There's a lot of those kind of plants, a lot of tomatoes, and so I'll try to remember and do my own search about the Rushmore tomatoes as well because I'm looking to grow new things this year, things I've never grown before. And if Rushmore is a short season kind of tomato, I might add it to my list. And if I do so, then I'll definitely tell you all about it, either in a live stream or a video in the future. But sorry, Serena, after all that effort, maybe someone else can tell you more about it. But like the specific questions, how big the plant and fruit, I have absolutely no idea. So you'd have to do a search and find out from a seed website to see what they say about it. Patrick Kelly's wondering, do you know much about bloodleaf plants? Was trying to take a cutting before I left, but hard to see where it is shooting. It's well established and growing well. No, that's another one of those plants that I've never grown. Is a bloodleaf plant. I've seen some pictures that I think were identified as bloodleaf plant, and I think my region is just too cold to grow them, which is probably why I don't know anyone that I can think of that's growing them either. And so another excuse to get on and do some investigative work and do a search of that and see what you can find. But that's another one of those plants that I haven't grown. And it's it gets back to the concept. There are so many plants out there and so many regional plants, and there's somebody else who's grown the plant. But even someone like me who's grown thousands upon thousands of plants, I haven't grown everything. And there's, I've never grown a banana plant, and I've never grown those type of warm season plants, or I should say tropical plants that require the warm season year round. I've just never lived in a place like that where I could grow those. So I'll look at the pictures and I'll even read to find out about it. Like a banana plant. Did you know a banana plant is actually an herb? It's not the kind of thing you would think it'd be. It's not a tree. It's actually a root, an herb. And so it is quite distinctive in the botanical world for how it grows. So I can tell you that about a banana, but I've never grown a banana. So I couldn't tell you how to grow some of the most common fruits that we eat, just because I live in an area kind of like what Vermont looks like and can't get by with the plants that just don't grow here. And so become the expert, especially if you're having difficulty finding out about the Rushmore tomato or the bloodleaf plant, and you do the research. Become an expert. That's one of the ways I think that we as gardeners move ourselves up the experience ladder and become master gardeners. Not somebody who's gone through a course and been certified, but someone who's taken the time to do some investigation, found out about a plant that nobody else knows about, and now you become the expert in that plant. So whenever the question comes up from somebody else, you can now answer the question and put yourself out there and be willing to answer some of those questions when people are asking and you know the answer and nobody else around you knows it. That now begins to show your gardening prowess, and you really can become better at just the whole gardening education. And the more you do that, and the more you learn, and the more plants that you put into your garden that no one else is growing, it makes all of us better, I think, because when we can get together with other gardeners and have those conversations, oh, it's so wonderful. I love getting together with my gardener friends and talk about the new things we're growing. And every year, all of us grow something that no one else has ever grown. And so there's an hour when you get 5 gardeners talking about what they're growing and no one else in the group has grown that plant, and all 5 can add to the conversation. Suddenly an hour of your life has gone by and you've learned about new things that you didn't even know before. So I definitely love those kind of conversations when we can talk about the things that we really don't know otherwise. Um, okay. I'm going to try to catch up a little bit. I know I've been chatting and losing out on some of the comments that are going through. Connie saying, I love seeing the snow scenes, not so much being in the snow. I want it to melt rapidly. Move to Colorado. We get a lot of snow, but it tends to melt pretty quickly. Most of the snow that we had on Friday into Saturday, it's now Monday morning, and at least on the streets and the sidewalks, it's gone. There is no snow. I still have some snow on the ground in my garden, but for the most part, it's melted, and we've got a warm week ahead. And I'm guessing by the end of the week, all the snow is going to be gone. But we have a possibility of a white Christmas. We haven't had a white Christmas since 2012. And so we typically have a white Christmas about once every 20 years here in my part of Colorado. And we might actually have some snow this Christmas. And my son and his family are going to be driving up from Louisiana. All of us are going to be together here. And wouldn't that be wonderful to have a white Christmas for my grandson who has never seen snow, living in Louisiana? And the first snow he sees is on Christmas morning at Poppy's house. I'm looking forward to it. So keep your fingers crossed that we get some snow. Hi, Dan. Uprooted 2 pepper plants mid-November, put in containers with minimal soil in my basement under grow lights. Already harvested 2 pounds of peppers. Just got 4 ounces more. About to make hot sauce. Outstanding. I love that idea. I wanted to do that this year, and I just got too busy and didn't do it. But I think you've motivated me, Dan. I need to do that next year. I love that idea to keep the season going. Again, so your pepper season didn't end just because they were outside and you're not gardening outside. Now you're gardening inside the same plants. That's why the fluidity of the garden season is just so wonderful, and we shouldn't hinder ourselves when we look at the calendar. Good for you, Dan. That is absolutely fantastic. I wish I could be harvesting some of those peppers again, and I wish I had taken that extra effort. Nachi G, nice to see you back. Merry Christmas to you. Appreciate your dedication, and thank you so much. I appreciate you having been such a long time and faithful viewer, and it's so much appreciated. Thank you for that super chat, and I hope you have a wonderful Christmas as well as we begin to approach the holiday season. Yankee Sister, any birthday celebrating in December? Mine is at the end of December, exactly a week after yours. So happy birthday to you, and I hope you have a fantastic time. Uh, for those of us who have birthdays within a week of Christmas, we know how that can be challenging, particularly in our childhood, but I enjoy it now. So I hope you're enjoying it and looking forward to it here in just a few days. So happy birthday to everybody in the December timeframe who is having a birthday. Caroline says, thank you. I'm prepping raised beds now. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. So good. Glad that I can help. It's always nice that we can share all the information. Serena's sharing, what does the garden say when it laughs? Ho, ho, ho. I like that. Christmas and garden joke all together. That's fantastic. So in the Garden with Eli and Kate has gifted some Gardner Scott memberships. So fantastic. Sunset Gazing and In the Garden with Eli and Kate. There are 10 lucky people today that have the Gardner Scott memberships. And so for those of you that aren't sure what this means, this is all open and free. The Gardner Scott live streams that I do on Mondays, the videos that I do, and that's what we that are creating on YouTube do. But there are many channels, including mine, that have memberships as another opportunity. And so you can see a link in the description below. If you're looking on a PC, you'll actually see a little blue and white button that says join, and you can become a member. Now, it is a paid membership. It's a way to support the channel and support all of the things that we do to be able to make these videos. And depending on what level you join, you get different perks. And so some of the things, so like when you look at the comments, you'll actually see some people who have a tomato next to their name, or they have a pumpkin next to their name, or they have a pepper next to their name, or they have a watermelon next to their name. And so those little icons show that they're a member. And depending on which fruit they have, it tells how long they've been a member. So you actually change your fruit the longer you've been a member. And then at the training and collaborator levels, every year or every month, I do extra live streams that are only for the members. And I if I have a ton of questions that are showing up on the chat, I will give priority to someone that is a member. That's why that symbol really helps me identify who is who is whom when it comes to the participation in the chat. So there are some benefits to being a member of the channel, and it does help support the channel. And as we found out today, you can gift memberships to other people so they can also take advantage of those perks as well. One of the perks that I like the most is the Facebook page that we have. And it's a members only Facebook page. And that's the place that you can post a picture, you can post a video, you can ask questions, you can show off what you're doing in the garden. And it's a wonderful community of the members that we can chat on a daily basis about what's happening in our garden. So if any of that interests you, think about the membership, because that does gain you access to some of that one-on-one time. And there's Greg, a new member. Awesome, Greg. And so it gets you into the ability to participate in a lot of the things that we're doing. And Yankee Sister Homestead, always nice to have you here. Peace, joy, and blessings to you as well, and forevermore. So grateful for sharing this year with all of you. And I'm so thankful for the time that we've shared. For those of you who don't know, I've kind of mentioned it in a few ways in the year, but I actually visited the Yankee Sister Homestead back in May, and it was such a fantastic visit. And I filmed it, and it may find its way into a video someday. But you all are such fantastic people, and my time in Connecticut was very, very memorable. So joy and blessings and peace right back at you, because you definitely made my year much better, just being able to meet you and your family as well, and seeing your garden. And Sandy, thank you as well. Merry Christmas to you, Sandy, and thank you for that super chat contribution as well. You all are fantastic. Grow Big TV, and we talked about Grow Big TV the last couple of weeks with Joe and Corky. So thank you for that as well. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year right back at you. And so I will point out, Jay has posted a link to the Facebook Gardener Scott. So there's actually two different Facebooks. So I am on Facebook as Gardener Scott. And then there's also the members only Facebook, that is the Gardener Scott community page. So yeah, feel free to check out the Facebook page. I don't post a lot on Facebook, but if you have a question or if you want to see what's happening, that's one place that that's a social media place that I go to. And Instagram, I mentioned Instagram a few weeks ago. I've started Instagram thanks to Eli and Kate. They got me motivated, and so I've been trying to post on a fairly regular basis on Instagram, some of the behind the scenes stuff that I don't necessarily show in my videos. And so my most recent post a couple days ago, I showed the dozens and dozens of jelly and jam jars that I have getting ready to be given out as presents during the holiday season. So check out Gardener Scott on Instagram as well, if you do Instagram. Greg, thank you so much for that. Happy holidays, New Year to all of you. And again, right back at you, Greg. Happy holidays, Happy New Year. And this is one of those things. It's really hard. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that this is the last show of 2023, with Christmas next Monday, and then with New Year's the following Monday. I'm not going to have a live stream for the next 2 weeks, so I won't be back until January 8th of 2024. And so the thought of not being here for the next 2 weeks is, I don't want to say it's depressing, because I like to stay upbeat for the holidays, but I'm going to miss all of you over the course of the next couple of weeks. So I hope all of you have just a wonderful time in those weeks that we can't be together, but we'll be back the new year, and we'll get all this kicked off again and get going for the calendar new year. But hopefully all of you are still in your garden season, be it a planting season or planting season, a sowing season, a cleanup season. There's always something going on. So even though it's a new year, and I use the new year to really motivate myself, because the days are getting longer and my garden is with each day closer to being planted after the new year. It's just another day on the calendar, but we'll miss seeing each other for a couple weeks, and then we can get started again and get it going with the next part. So the last few weeks we've been talking about reviewing the season, coming up with a plan, some of the successes, the idea that gardening may be a year-round activity and not limited to a calendar, And then when we get back next year, I'll start focusing more and more on seeds and seed selection and seed starting and answer all your questions, because January and February tend to be the time that for many of us, it's the season that we start thinking about seeds. So I'm going to try to match the live streams to that. So think about your questions, think about what you're doing. And if you come across something that you want to know more about in January, I'll be here to help with that. Thank you so much, Gail, for that. Happy holidays to you. Thank you for all you do for the gardening community. I've learned so much from you and this community. And thank you as well, Gail. And so we pointed out the background today. That's Gail's garden. And I've mentioned a few times about the YouTube channel that they have in Vermont, especially with the greenhouse. So I'm so glad I could help in any way, because you have such a beautiful property, and it's so nice to see your garden and your greenhouse and all the fun things you're doing with your gardening as well. So Robin's asking, how do I become a member? And so look in the description below for a link that takes you to the place that you can sign up to be a member. Or if you watch on a PC, you can click on that box that says join. It's a blue and white box. And those are the easiest ways to do it. Just click the link in the description below this video and below any other videos that I do. My newer videos all have that in the description, the link to become a member. And it's really easy, and it explains a lot more about that. Yeah, llama. I'm going to have withdrawals too. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be hard not spending Monday mornings with all of you, because that's the way I get my garden week started. And getting my garden week started helps with that motivation to get outside and get in the garden and do the cleanup and do those other activities. So I'll be focused on having my family here, and that's a nice substitute. But of course, I'll miss all of you as well. And Sandy gifted a Gardener Scott membership. So thank you, Sandy. That's so nice of you to do that as well. And so much giving today. I appreciate that on so many levels. Michelle Gerardo, happy holidays to all this amazing group. Wonderful group of kind and sharing people. Yes, I completely agree. And it's such an, I think one of the reasons I became a gardener, not just someone who gardens, but a gardener. I think there's a difference. I think people who grow things just because, and they let them die, and maybe they harvest something, but they are just growing things. When you stop and you take some time and you recognize that you're really enjoying it and you want to do more of it, you're becoming a gardener. And when you become a gardener who is spending the time with your plants, indoors or outdoors, hydroponic in containers, whatever it is, when you are becoming close to your plants and taking care of them just like you would take care of a young child, you're a gardener. And when you do that, I think you become a different person. I think you become a special person. And I think gardeners are more giving. I think they are more helpful, because as a gardener, we have to learn those lessons. We have to learn patience. We have to learn how to take care of something that is tender and can't necessarily protect itself. And we have to be the ones to make sure that plant survives. And that really brings something special to each of us. So it becomes easy to have that same feeling with those around us, be they family or friends or strangers. I think gardeners are just a special type of person. And we see that every week with all of you. And Tony, thank you so much. Another gift of 5 memberships. So I look forward to seeing you all. And like I said, the Facebook group is a good place to meet up. And even Tony is on the Facebook page from time to time, sharing his great wisdom, and we'll chat about what's happening in the simplified gardening garden from time to time on that Facebook group as well. So thank you for that, Tony. Dennis Blevins, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone. And thank you for that super chat. I do appreciate it. It's such a wonderful time. And whether it's snowy where you're at, or whether it's green where you're at, or rainy where you're at, it's still, I say, get out and get in your garden and do the most you can to enjoy every aspect of it. Sherry says, for me, nurturing plants remind me of years in wildlife rehab. There you go. Nurturing is a great word. I love that word, because we really are nurturing plants. So I completely agree with you, and that's nice that you can use that as a reminder of something like wildlife rehab. That's fantastic. That's a wonderful thing to have in your history, and something that you've been able to add to your gardening world as you nurture the plants moving forward. So absolutely fantastic. And Serena says, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all. And Barbara saying, thank you for the membership. There's so much Thanksgiving and receiving today. This is just absolutely fantastic. This is why I'm going to miss you all for the next 2 weeks. So don't lose this. I know, traditionally this is a time of year that we're giving and receiving anyway, but beyond the holidays, keep this same feeling in your heart as you give and receive, and you just feel that nurturing and the enjoyment that gardening brings to all of us. That's fantastic. And Jay is saying thanks to Francois. So I'll say thanks to Francois Boulet as well. Thank you for that super sticker in Canada. I appreciate it greatly. So thank you so much, Francois. And I appreciate that as well, Jay, to also acknowledge that. And Jinky sister, yay to all in your giving. So it's just so warm, so warm. You've made my week, all of you, definitely, with not only being here, but about the things you're doing and the things you want. Like Lawrence is saying, maybe in January, we could have a chat about books that you really find useful, inspiring, or which have sparked your interest in something new. I like that idea. I'm going to make note of that. Yeah, we'll do a book discussion. So I do have some videos where I review some of my favorite books. And so I know each time I say that, it comes to, it's a surprise to many of you, because the videos that I make tend to be pretty popular and get thousands of views. The videos I make that have the least amount of views are my book review videos. And so you can check in on my homepage, the Gardner Scott page on YouTube, and you'll see a playlist that talks about the books. And you can also click on a link in the description below to take you to a site that lists all of the books that I recommend. So that's a good idea, Lawrence. I think we can definitely do that, because when I make the videos, they're not seen by very many people. But maybe in a live stream, we can have some dialogue where I can talk about books and you all can respond with whether you've read the book or if you have another book to recommend. I like that idea. So I've written it down, and you can expect to see that in January, Lawrence. And so I definitely appreciate that input. And I think I said it last week that the ideas I have for my videos are wide ranging, a long list of ideas that I have. Occasionally I'll get a new idea, and that usually prompts me to modify my plan, and I'll definitely throw a new idea that I like into the mix. And especially if you give me your idea of what you'd like to see and it matches something that I'm already planning, it also is a great way to ensure that that video gets made in a more timely manner. So I'm always looking for your input, and I do appreciate the input that you have. Frank is saying, one more time, recommending Gardner Scott's April 1st video. Yukon Cornelius, Tasting Soil, a character from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So thank you for that, Frank. Yeah, my April Fool's video this year, uh, I I show Yukon Cornelius, and I talk about Yukon Cornelius, and you can see in that video what the results are. So thanks, Frank. I appreciate that. I definitely enjoy um, doing all of those. And so I'm not sure if I highlighted this, Dennis, so I'm going to highlight it again just in case I missed it. But thank you again. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all. As I'm scrolling up and down, even if I show it twice, just want to make sure it gets to be seen. Bohemian Herbology Natural Solutions, children gardening books. Is that a thing? It totally should be, and a beyond phenomenal idea. Yeah, it absolutely is. And so, not a lot of children's gardening books, but I've bought some for my grandchildren, and I haven't done any videos about it, and actually I hadn't thought about doing videos about the children's gardening books, but we can add that to our discussion in January because they're out there, but you definitely have to search for them, and it's not something that you would necessarily find in a bookstore. You might have to order it from an online site, but uh, absolutely. And getting kids involved with gardening, for those of you who have watched me on a regular basis, know I'm very supportive of that. I think it's hugely important to get kids involved with gardening as early as possible. And the books definitely help. And so, um, Cell Sith is saying the zombie gardening video is my all-time fave YouTube video. Thank you for that. That is definitely in the top 5 of my favorite videos as well. So I really enjoyed making that video, and I also enjoy watching it periodically as well. So thank you for that, because I do think it is a fun video, and I definitely recommend it. If you haven't seen my April 1st Zombies in the Garden video, you should check that one out too, because it's a lot of fun. Kevin Cartwright, thank you. Have a safe and happy holidays. Time to trim the trees. That's my plan. I'm actually planning to put my tree up today, and my grandkids are going to be coming over in a few days, and they'll finish decorating the tree, and then my son and his family should be here on Christmas Eve, and they'll have a role in finishing it up as well. So yes, time to trim, and I hope, Kevin, you have a wonderful time as you're trimming your tree as well. And then in the Garden with Eli and Kate says, love the spaghetti harvest video. So that was actually the first April 1st video that I did, was how to grow spaghetti. So so glad you loved it. Those are always fun. And I can see in the comments that Jay has been posting some links. So if you don't know what we're talking about, go to some of those links that Jay has been posting, and that can take you where you might want to go. Shandy's Garden. I will suggest Jessica Soward's very first introduction to gardening book. So beautiful and easy to understand. It's still on Amazon. It's one of the very first books that pop up about gardening. So thank you for that suggestion. I don't think I've seen that one. So that's another one that I'll look for. And I've already gotten some gardening stuff for my family this year, but can never have too much. So if you're looking to buy some gifts and you still have time and not sure what to get, gardening books are definitely the way to do it. I counted my gardening books. I forget the number, but I have a few hundred gardening books in my library that I've accumulated over the many years of gardening, and I'm still adding books to it. One of the most recent books I added to my library was Tony O'Neill's book, most recent book, and there's another one coming out soon. So reference material like Tony O'Neill's gardening books really, I think, are a great way to advance your gardening information and experience as well, because you can do a search online, and all of us do it, and that's great. But when you can actually hold a book in your hands and look at the pictures and cross reference pages and see the context, I think a lot of that is missing in the information we get online is it doesn't always include the context to answer the question that we're asking. And books can give that to us. And especially for kids starting off, there's a good way to get started. So thank you for that recommendation. So 2 weeks without Gardner Scott, 2 weeks for me without you. We'll get through it and it'll be the new year when we come back. I hope all of you have a very happy and very safe holiday season. Whatever holiday you might be celebrating, even if you're not celebrating holidays, there's a lot of people around us who are, and it can get a little bit crazy. So stay safe, be safe, and I hope that you're all able to join us again in the new year for more talk. We've been doing this for a long time now, and we'll be doing it for a long time more. And you all are so special in my life. And I give thanks all the time for you being here. So, once again, thank you for being part of my community and our community and helping each other out and carry that with you as we move forward to the end of this calendar year and begin another calendar year. But the gardening year continues. And that's what we'll be focusing on January 8th. Be safe, be happy, and of course, as always, enjoy gardening. I'll see you next time.